The king is back, baby. And I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about Katsu. Let's get into it today. All right, so I'm gonna try to contain my excitement here, but it might be a little hard because we've been imprisoned for about a year now, and thank God that we have now been set free. Zen is now gone, which means we get bonds back to 3, and that is more than enough. Granted, I would like all of them back, but let's take it one step at a time here. 3 bonds is more than enough to make Katsu a functional deck again. Is this deck an A, S tier deck? Absolutely not. Katsu is probably back in B tier, but the deck is extremely difficult to play now. It always has been a hard deck to play, but now with Retrace, there's so many crazy pathways and different lines. Like, my brain breaks when I sit there and I hit them, and I just pause and look at the board, and my opponents are like, the damage is good. I'm like, no, I understand. I just have like 3 on-hit triggers that I have to consider now that I want to use. Give me a second. Now, that probably will begin to be more clear as I play the deck more again. But even before we had bonds back and I was messing with Katsu last season when he was absolute trash, you still had some decent pathways and some decent lines that you could play. But now things have just been blown open because every time I was sitting there, I'm like, man, if only I had bonds, I could do this and it'd be awesome. And here we are in a world back with bonds. Now, as we move into Nats, is Katsu going to be a relevant deck for Nats? It's really hard to say. I wouldn't say he's relevant. I do think that he is playable, and it would not shock me if there was a Katsu that was running the tables as we moved through. He does have some unfortunate matchups and some pretty decent matchups. I think that's really what sets him in B tier. Although the deck is very strong, you do have some pretty miserable matchups. And then we also have the High Seas Heroes, which I don't have a lot of matchups into at this point. A lot of it is just going to be theory. And we'll get to that as we move further into the deck, but let's just get into it. I'm not really innovating anything crazy. I have been playing Katsu for like 3 years now, 3 or 4 years. I mean, the deck where it was a year ago is pretty much where I have it at now, plus some of the new cards that have been added. But at its core, it's pretty much clean, I would say. I'm very, very happy with where this list is at. There's just a handful of tech cards, a handful of little sideboard things that maybe I'd want to shift depending on how the meta ends up developing. But I'm gonna stop talking. Let's just get into it. There'll be plenty more to talk about. So the boys back. So what are we gonna start with? We got 3 Ancestral Empowerment, of course. This card's not gonna change. Card is integral to Katsu's strategy, especially when you have this crappy card here, Be Like Water. Be Like Water is not bad, but we are just in an era of Flesh and Blood now where Surging Strike is such a horrible card. A 2 for 5, go again, 2 block that you have to play in order for the deck to actually function. It's just a little behind what we would like to be doing, but Be Like Water kind of helps curve that out, so at least you get something with a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more consistency. And although it might not hit as consistently, it is a 0 cost, which is very relevant. And with Ancestral Empowerment, this is like one of your bread and butter plays, and this is just a very, very powerful interaction. So as we move on here, like I was mentioning, we have one of the worst cards in Flesh and Blood, Surging Strike. Although the card itself is bad, everything else that comes along aside of it in this deck that it functions with is quite good. You have to play it. It's just part of the deck. Like, it's part of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. It's the peanut butter. Although you might not want to eat peanut butter with a spoon, I kind of do. It's the sum of its parts, or whatever the phrase is. You need all of it in order for it to be good. So Surging Strike is necessary. We move into the Gust Waves. We got, obviously, 3 red Whelming Gust Wave, 3 red Descendant, and now we have 2 of the underwhelming Dookie Gust Waves. I wasn't even playing this card. I really am not even convinced this card is worth playing. I don't even know if it's really that good, but I initially was playing this list without it. I've put 2 in. It's not as bad as I had thought it was going to be. The one thing that is positive about it is it just ups your consistency for the deck, where you can natty combos people, and that it triggers off of bonds, makes it far more relevant than it was last meta before we had bonds, where it was pretty much irrelevant. But now with bonds, I do think this card is somewhat relevant. I'm testing it out at 2. I don't know. I don't really know if it's a one of, just because you want to have the option to be able to tutor it out with bonds if necessary, so you can loop still occasionally. I don't know. I'm going to keep it at 2. I've kind of liked it at 2. It feels pretty good at 2. And the one nice thing about it is that since it's naturally 4, unlike Whelming Gust Wave, like when you have your Breeze Rider Boots pop-off turns, it is nice to have the 4 breakpoint naturally rather than just using your Whelming Gust Waves with just head jabs at that point. So I do like that it is a natural 4, which is quite good. But I don't really know if it's necessary. I'm going to keep it at 2, like I said, and it feels pretty good with bonds. And then we have the All-Star, the GOAT, the greatest ninja card ever printed, Bonds of Ancestry. I don't know what else there is to say about this card. It's been banned, it's been limited, it's been restricted in LL, and now here we have back 3 red bonds, which is so much better than no bonds. I love this card. It feels so good to play this deck again. I love Katsu so much. This deck is so much fun, and now is probably one of my most favorite times for the deck. Losing Art of War makes your ceiling go far, far lower, but I also kind of like not having the Art of War where you have a little bit more consistency and you're able to kind of build heavier into combo, and you still have Ancestral Harmony. But Bonds of Ancestry in combo with Retrace the Past, which we'll get to when we get to that card, is just, it's a thing of beauty. It's just some of the most fun Flesh and Blood interactions I've had in a very long time. So props to LSS. Thank you for doing the right thing and finally bringing this card back because it really is not that bad. In terms of it only being at 3 right now, I think that it is a very fair and balanced card compared to the rest of the cards that are in the game. And then we just get to our other combo cards here. We have 100 Wins, which is still really good, obviously. We have Spinning Wheel Kick. Awesome. Upgraded leg tap. It has the combo word, and it gets its trigger if you just play multiple, just like 100 Wins. These are basically like very similar to one another. They're like, I look at them as more Katsu trigger cards, where when you play them, you're trying to fish out a comboed hit trigger. So you can tutor out like one of your Gust Waves if you're holding a Surging in hand or something like that. But they also just add consistency, and they're really good bond targets since they have natural go again. So if you want to extend your turn, these are really good. And then you have Flusterfist. Still one of the better cards in your combo, and especially now that you can actually trigger its ability with Retrace the Past, it just makes it so good. I love Flusterfist, I always have, and I think now more than ever. Some people are always discussing like Flusterfist and Gust Wave being a swap. I still would play Flusterfist over Gust Wave any day. The text on it is relevant now, which makes it really good, and it being a really great bonds target is always better than this card, in my opinion. So Flusterfist is still one of the best. Now we move to yellows. Again, nothing super innovative. You're going to just see a little bit more redundancy so we can get consistency. We have 3 yellow Surging Strike. This is, I think, the worst card in the deck for a number of reasons. One, it's 2 costs, so you can't discard it. You can't pitch it for your Kodachis. They do not get go again. And it is a 4 breakpoint, which means a D-React, it just covers it up. I usually always go back and forth between playing 2 yellow Surging Strike and 3 yellow. At the start now, I'm just going to put it at 3 just because you need that added consistency. Again, without peanut butter, you can't make a peanut butter sandwich, and that's just kind of how I'm looking at this in terms of the consistency of the deck and how it functions. I'm just going to keep it at 3 for now, but it is always on the chopping block to go to 2, just for a matter of if I'm going to cut one of the worst cards on the deck, it's going to be Surging Strike. Now, some people who have been, I've been looking at lists, have been cutting Descendant, yellow Descendants down to 2. I think that that is crazy. I would much rather have Descendant over Surging Strike. I look at Descendant as an enhanced version of Surging Strike because although you don't get the combos like with Whelming or with Gust Waves or things like that, Descendant just skips the fact that you have to have Surging Strike to make your lines work. Descendant can allow you to just branch immediately into bonds. It can branch immediately into Retrace the Past. And with it having natural go again, it's always a threat. Like you just play a Descendant, your opponent immediately has to decide, do I want to block this? Because if I don't block this, then they could just get bonds, and now I'm going to have to take another 8 damage potentially. So it adds a lot more of a difficult decision for your opponent. It allows you way more flexibility with your turns, and it's a lot less bricky than Surging Strike is, for example. And it has combo in the text. It's just so good. Triple yellow and triple red Descendant, I think these are like the core components of the deck, even more than Surging Strike. And even when we lost bonds, I was still playing high counts of Descendant just because Descendant, I think, allows you to immediately branch off and do your Katsu stuff as opposed to having to find your other pieces like Surging Strike. And now with Retrace, if you want to have Surging Strike, you can go Descendant, get Retrace, call Retrace Surging Strike, and then go into Whelming or something like that, right? So this is just the superior starter compared to Surging Strike. I think Descendant is just far better. And now we have our Toolbox yellows. We have one Break Tide. A little moist tech, you know, I like having it in there as a potential mind trick and a nice finisher, especially on a smaller hand. It offers a really solid threat to your opponent, and it's tutorable. You'll notice that among my yellow choices here, we have one Break Tide, 100 Winds, and then one Whelming. These are to add consistency to the yellow pool, and they all share something in common. They're all 0 cost, they're all yellow, and they're all tutorable by Lynx Mask because they're 2 attack and less. Now this is all very relevant, and also of course they're combo, but because with bonds, it allows you to have one more option for your common combo cards that you want to tutor out between 100 Winds and Whelming. They are, again, like I said, yellows, so they're really good for pitching, and they will activate Kadachi as opposed to your other yellows, which do not. And then I am trying the Break Tide. I don't know if it's going to stay in there, but just for the fact that you can play it, and it can offer a good mind game where when you play Retrace, you name it Flood of Force. Now your opponent immediately starts getting alarm bells in their head, thinking, oh my gosh, do they have the Break Tide? Am I going to have to be prepared to block that out? And Break Tide is just much more powerful than like Take the Tempo or something, because it says any card. It doesn't have to have combo. It doesn't have to be an attack. It's just any card that you banish off the top of your deck can be played. So even if it's a D-React, even if it's an Ancestral Empowerment, a Surging Strike, this deck, just getting one more additional card for the next turn, increases the ceiling so much higher. So I think this card is very impressive. Would I played it too? Maybe. It hasn't really been performing like exceedingly well. Like I'm very happy having it as an option in the deck, but I don't know if it's something that I want to go and play into multiple times. See, that's the harder thing with this deck now, having Retrace and Bonds. A lot of times when you're trying to evaluate, do I want to go into a Retrace line or do I want to go into a Bonds line? Bonds is always higher value, so you're more encouraged to go into a Bonds line unless you are trying to like do a Bonds Retrace line. And in that situation, it's been a lot harder for me to end with like Retrace into like one of your unique finishers like Break Tide or Find Center or something like that. So I don't really want to play into it. Again, it's just nice to have as an option. But the nice thing about playing two is you can then have this in your grave and then activate Bonds and trigger this as a target. So I don't know. We'll see. As I keep playing, maybe I'll bump it up. It's a 3-block as well. This card is just really good. I mean, 3-block, 0 cost, yellow, 2, so it's tutorable by Lynx Mask. It's just, I'm very, very happy with Break Tide. I'm glad that it's actually a playable card and you don't have to play the horrible, crappy line that you usually would have to play in order to get into it. So it's just really nice to have as an option. And then, yeah, I don't need to say much more about these cards, just more gooder cards that are in the yellow form. All right, let's get to the blues. We got triple Ancestral Harmony. Again, I've seen some people playing 2. I think that this card you have to play at 3 now, especially when you're bad matchups like the Guardians, like Victor, for example. You still got a high roll. You still got to hit your mega power turns, and that will always revolve around having Ancestral as the turn starter. A lot of times you got to play Ancestral and you got to hit. Those are really the only ways you can beat those matchups a lot of the time. And especially now, the combo density of this deck is extremely high. You might notice I'm not playing Enlightened Strike. I think that card's too clunky. I'm not playing Snatch. I think it's too clunky. I'm not playing Command and Conquer. Again, it's a little too clunky for me. I just want to keep this as streamlined, as consistent, and as high of a combo count as possible. And because of that, Harmony hits a lot of times. Of course, you're going to have those horrible situations where you hit Surging Strike or something like that. But at the end of the day, the probability is on your side and it is in favor of you. And even if you hit one of your blues, it doesn't matter because now your blues are actually all very strong. Like all the blues in this deck, of course, unless you draw an all blue hand, which is pretty bad. But all the blues have a lot of merit as an extender for your turn because you can combo off on any of them. Which leads me into the best card that is in our blue slot, Retrace the Past. Man, I don't know how long I'll be here talking about this card. This card has simultaneously increased the skill level of this deck by like 3 points. It's also increased the consistency of the deck by like 3 points, and it's increased the fun level of the deck by like infinite points. So I don't even know if you've played Katsu before, then I don't really have to explain much to you about how great it is, but if you are new to Katsu, one of the issues that the deck has always faced, obviously, is Well, there's a number of combo cards that you can't play because you don't play the combo line in the deck, obviously. Or you reach those breakpoints in the game where you have pieces of a combo, but you're missing one of the pieces that allows you to fully accomplish the combo or branch paths. Retrace fixes all those issues. It allows you to play smaller hands. It allows you to play bigger hands. It allows you to find pieces that you may need in the middle of a combo, or if you want to just have a short little one, like I mentioned before, you go like Descendant, get Retrace, and then end with Breaktide or something. That's a very, very powerful hand that your opponent would usually maybe not be respecting or think about that path branching. It just creates much more confusion for your opponent to have to worry about. In addition, you get access to the more powerful finishers like Breaktide and Find Center, and also Flusterfist gets text. It also buffs off of 100 wins, it buffs Spinning Wheel Kick. Again, you can combo loop, like I had mentioned, you could call it Surging Strike, so then you can follow with a Whelming after the fact, which I've done a number of times to extend your hands, which triggers the on-hit ability. It's just amazing. I mean, this card was such a huge buff for Katsu. It just wasn't quite there when we didn't have Bonds, but now that we have Bonds and Retrace, it's like, I don't want to say it's a buffed blue Bonds, but it is somewhat similar to blue Bonds in what it does. It just adds a different direction for the deck rather than just like a value engine. Okay, and then we just have, obviously, Whelming Gust Wave. Again, consistency. It's the best blue that we have. It's a 3-block, 0 cost. And it's just integral to like it's the jelly of the peanut butter sandwich, I guess, right? Oh, and then we have this beautiful, beautiful card, Dishonor. People have already forgotten what this card does, which is amazing. If you don't know, let me remind you. It says, when this hits a hero, if you control Surging Strike, Descending Gust Wave, and Bonds of Ancestry, that hero loses all of their hero power for the rest of the game. This is so great across the meta. There are so many powerful hero abilities, especially with the high seas heroes, things like that, that just eliminating hero power can just be game winning for a lot of different scenarios as well. And this card, now with Bonds, obviously it's playable again. Before, it was a joke to say that you could play it even with Retrace. It was like not a possible thing. And if it was never hitting. It just wasn't worth it. But the other thing with this now is with Retrace, you can have multiple combo lines where you're splitting between going like Surging Strike into Whelming Gust Wave into Bonds, and then you tutor out like a Descendant, and then you play Descendant, and then you play Retrace, and then you call Retrace Bonds or something, and then you Dishonor. Because you're able to have Retrace to fill in the missing combo piece, whether it be Descendant or Surging Strike or something like that, like I was mentioning before, you can go Descendant Gust Wave into Retrace, call Retrace, Surging Strike, get Whelming Gust Wave, go Bonds, get Dishonor or whatever, and then Dishonor them. And even though you didn't go through the traditional line of going like Surging, Descendant, Bonds into Dishonor, Dishonor's still live because it will recognize that Surging Strike and Descendant and Bonds are in the chain. I know this is probably like speaking a foreign language if you haven't played Katsu, but if you are following me, just know that the flexibility of being able to play Dishonor with Retrace has become much easier, and it allows a lot more confusion in your line that your opponent might not know the direction that it's going, and which in turn will make it more likely for Dishonor to hit because they aren't preparing for your chain to end with Dishonor or something like that. Again, Retrace, just a GOAT, one of the best cards that they've printed for Katsu in quite some time. Obviously, I don't know about that. I think Bonds is probably the best card they printed for Katsu. And then we have 2 blue Flusterfists. Again, adds consistency. It's one of the better targets for Bonds, so just having a higher count of Flusters in your deck is just good stuff. We're always happy to have Flusterfist. And also, in the past, we've played Salt the Wound a few times for Katsu against like racing matchups, but now you have built-in Salt the Wounds with Flusterfist. Again, if you've never read this text, because it's pretty much been irrelevant for its entire existence, it's Salt the Wound. It says, if Open the Center was the last attack this combat chain, Flusterfist gains +1 for each attack that has hit this combat chain. Again, really great chain ender with Retrace since you can actually turn it on. I did this the other day at Locals. I flustered somebody for 8 because they weren't prepared for the Retrace combo to turn it into a live card, which is just really sick way to end the chain with, again, Bonds of Ancestry, playing the Retrace, and then turning it online. And then we have 2 Winds of Eternity. Still one of my favorite combo cards, but just not as powerful as these other blue options as you see. That's why we've trimmed it down to 2, but still very relevant. Another really sick thing you can do with Winds of Eternity, again with Retrace, is if you declare Retrace being 100 wins at some point in the chain, then you play another 100 wins, and then you play Winds of Eternity. If Winds of Eternity hits, your Retrace will go back into your deck and be shuffled back in again, which I've done also, which is really cool. Just being able to refilter and recycle your Retraces in the deck, especially with bonds, having options to how many times you can play it and loop it, is really, really fundamental to the power of the deck. And I was really stoked when I found out that ability. So similarly, I just think that these blues function really well with Retrace and other parts of your deck. And then we have one of the cutest combo cards that has ever existed, Find Center. Always kind of not quite there, has seen play throughout the entirety of Katsu's existence, sometimes being relevant, sometimes not being relevant. I remember when I first started playing Katsu right in Monarch era, Find Centers were like $50 because Crew, they had a big flood, and so Crew First was the only printed variant that was out. Crew Unlimited hadn't been printed yet, and so people were playing this in Katsu, even though you really couldn't trigger it, just because it was a zero-cost blue 3-block. And that's still what it is today. It's a zero-cost 3 blue block, which with combo on it, which is great, but it also now can be turned on with Retrace, which is super sick, so that we can have Zen State in this deck as well. Obviously not as busted and broken as Zen could do it, but we're out here working hard, right? Like, we don't just have an easy life like Zen had it. We actually have to work for what we got, but it's still extremely satisfying, albeit highly nerfed compared to what it used to be. Find Center, before they changed the ruling, they couldn't block with armor. Now they can just put armor in front of it. So you just have to be careful when you do play the Find Center. If you want it to hit, make sure that they're blocking with all their armor, or their armor doesn't have any more blocks, so you can guarantee the hit. But there are a lot of matchups where hitting with a Find Center and creating a Zen State is extremely powerful. And same kind of matchups that had happened with Viz and like the other aggro decks, such as Assassin. Well, that's not aggro, but like Syndra, right? But I'm also thinking of Assassin with Flick Daggers and stuff. So Find Center, super sick. I'm just like elated with this list. It just looks beautiful. It has all the good cards. There's not really any like filler that like we used to have to play. You just really get to pick and choose the options that you want, and it's highly consistent. Like, you're just gonna be like playing natty lines on people all the time. Your hands are easily fixed as soon as you hit somebody one time. And a lot of decks right now in the meta, although they're playing a lot of D-reacts and they have a lot of armor, which makes it a lot harder than it used to be, because you can just naturally combo people, you don't have to worry about hitting them all the time, right? Like before, you really had to back in the old days. But now you have so many more options to just be able to play your own lines. Like I said, that's what makes Descendant really important, is that you can just open with Descendant and then combo off of that. You can also do a lot of unlikely stuff too, where for example, I had a game yesterday where I had Red Whelming in Arsenal, Red Whelming in hand, and a Bonds. And I just played the Red Whelming. My opponent goes, no blocks. I hit, I activate Breeze Rider Boots, I activate Lynx Mask, and then I combo off for like a 22 damage turn off of a pretty mid 3-card hand. But because they let it hit one time unassumingly, it allowed me to just do some crazy damage because of Breeze Rider Boots and now being able to loop Whelming Gust Waves with Retrace and things like that. So although it's very unassuming, there are a lot of different lines that can happen by just letting somebody hit you one time can just completely change the game, basically. All right, let's get to the sideboard. I'm done kind of gushing over this for the meantime. I'm just super excited that Katsu is, although not a great deck, is a playable deck again. You know, I've been playing ninjas basically all last meta between the Draconic heroes, but Katsu's still my favorite, the core of my heart. We started the game together. You know, now with the new LL changes, if he does start winning at all, he'll probably go a lot quicker, which is sad. But he's had his time, and I'm more excited what they can do with Katsu in the future with a new variant of his hero power. Now with all these Katsu specs, right, there will be more Katsus in the future, right? I don't have to worry about that. So we got Katsu, we got the Kodachis, obviously. The funny thing about how Katsu has evolved, I feel like Katsu back in the day was highly dependent on Kodachis. That was one of your big core play lines, basically like Ira, right? You were doing more mid-ranging, more mask momentum kind of gameplay. So harmonized Kodachis were much better. In this list, you don't really care much about Kodachis. Like, you're very rarely swinging with them. If you are swinging with Kodachi, it's because your hand is kind of or you just have floating resources and you want to get a few more points of damage in, which is actually quite good because now with all the one prevention effects and frailty and stuff like that, there's a lot of decks that will just shut down your Kodachis all the time, which is pretty annoying, but fortunately the deck doesn't function around Kodachi, so it doesn't really affect what you're trying to do. You're still going to just be playing out your hand and trying to combo people. But it's still the best weapon we got, and it's still very relevant to get to people into Kodachi lock at the end of the game, and also to get like the additional hits if you're going to Flusterfist salt them, right, with the Flusterfist text, which is still relevant. So Kodachis are still quite good. They're just not as integral to the strategy. Now, this is like the main armor that I'm bringing into most matchups. We got the Lynx Mask, we got a Heart and Cross Strap, we got Breaking Skills, and then Breeze Rider Boots. This is what we were playing before. This is still what we're playing now. I really don't think that there's any other equipment that still functions with the same power level that these do, just pure explosive power. What Katsu wants to be doing now is very early, as long as you have like a little setup in your graveyard, you just get like one mega pop-off turn. And then by the second pop-off turn, which can usually happen the turn after or another turn, your opponent's dead. Typically, that's what the deck's wanting to do. You are just extremely fast, and it's more of like a one-hit, two-hit kill kind of deck. So you want to layer your big pop-off turns. Lynx Mask allows you now to tutor out Retrace. You can tutor out any of your Gust Waves. You can tutor out any of your blue Enders. So although we used to use the mask for like blue bonds or something, there's still a lot of relevant searches now. It's just more you're searching like finishers or Retrace, obviously, which is another intermediary combo line. But like that's why I'm playing these other yellows too, like the yellow Whelming, the yellow 100 Winds, and then the Break Tide as well, because they're all tutorable from Lynx Mask. And then we have our Arcane Barrier, you got Tide Flippers, you got No Room Gloves, and you got Arcane Lantern. Your Katsu matchup is actually kind of good. I'd say it's slightly favored because it's almost impossible for Kano to try to block you out. And you have a lot of blues, so you can AB a lot of their damage, and you put them on the clock very quickly. I mean, I think that by turn 2 or 3, you're probably going to be threatening lethal against them. The only thing that's a little tough about Kano is you obviously can't fill up your graveyard because you're not really blocking anything from them. So you have to naturally do it, which can end up getting into some early game clunk situations where you can't quite bonds yet or things like that. But I do like the Kano matchup. I think with AB3, it's pretty sufficient, and you're winning most of the time. And then we have like our alt armor pieces. We have Tunic and then Mask of Momentum. Tunic, I think, is primarily in the deck for like Jarl. I don't really know what other matchups I want to bring it in, to be honest. Maybe there's some slower matchups, but like I find myself more and more just leaning into the Heart and Cross Strap. I did this last year during Heavy Hitters meta. The one difference was last year in Heavy Hitters meta was that you still had Art of War, which made Tunic far more relevant because the matchups you wanted to high roll people or just explode with Art of War, like the Victor matchup, you'd play the Tunic so that you could do that. You wouldn't have to pitch for the Art of War. But now without it, I don't really know if there's if there's a lot of relevance to having Tunic. You know, like you don't really want the games to go long. You're not a mid-range like second cycle deck anymore. You're really like a combo, hyper aggro, super explosive deck, and the games are not going typically very long. I could see maybe trying it against Assassin. I could see maybe trying it into like Vincent, for example. I'm still going to mess around with it a little bit more. I still think it has a reason to be in the deck. I just find myself leaning towards it a lot less comparative to the Heart and Cross Strap. And then we have Mask of Momentum. This is like, I don't know. I don't even know if I want to have this card in my deck. This is more just hedging for the next meta with High Seas. If Gravy Bones is a relevant deck, then obviously you want Mask of Momentum into Gravy Bones. But you know what? I'm not even sure if that's true. You might still just want Lynx Mask because if you hit any of their allies, you can trigger the Lynx and then combo and just kill them. So this is going to require more testing. This card is definitely on the chopping block. I don't know if it's worth having in the deck. The only other matchup that maybe I'd want to try it into is Prism, for example. But I would still need to test that as well. The theory behind Prism is that it's an additional 2-block, and it allows them to not be able to, what's the card called? Triumph? Is it Triumph? Yeah, Figment of Triumph. No, it's not Triumph. Judgment. Figment of Judgment, where they can flip your banished card face down. so they can target whenever you Link Smask or something like that. But as Katsu, you're doing that all the time anyway with Katsu trigger, so it might just not be as relevant. You might just want to burst them anyway. So Magical Momentum is the card that I think is most likely to come out and have a more sideboard space, which is fine with me because I'm already pretty low on sideboard space. But just so you're aware, this card is just in there on the principle of Gravy Bones as a deck, and it's going to be out, and it is better in theory than Link Smask. But I think that's a lot of theory and a lot of assumptions that hasn't been proven yet, and I am more on the train of that. I just think Lynx is far better in this variant of Katsu than Magical Momentum is. All right, and then we got our sick tokens here for Warmongers. We got War or Peace, courtesy of my boys out in Poland. Put that up there. And then we have our sideboard, which is pretty small. It's really just like the necessities. We got 3 Blanche. This is just like pick your flavor, right? Do you want Battle from Bastions? Do you want Blanche? Do you want Cut Through the Facade? Again, Blanche is a theory. I don't think I'm playing it into anything other than Prism. It's Prism tech. But Blanche does offer some it offers some splash damage against like the high seas heroes, right? Against Gravy Bones, against, I don't know if you'd even play it against any of the other ones. But you know, they all have like the color things like blue and yellow strip. So maybe it's anti-Gravy Bones tech. Even if we need it, I feel like Katsu just slaughters Gravy Bones, but we'll see. Again, it's all theory. Primarily Prism tech though. Then we have our D-Reacts. We got Flick Flack. Of course, this card's insane, as it always has. It's really great D-React value. And then I have 2 Shelter. I would maybe go up to 3 Shelter. I don't know. Maybe that's what the Magical Momentum would be. But this is primarily for Ranger. It's for Assassin. Again, particularly against Assassin. That's why Shelter is good. I know there's like a big thing between Shelter and Wax On, especially if you, or Wax Off. Specifically for the Assassin matchup, because it's like, do you want the +1 value with a 5 block, or do you want to have the discard ability to be able to block daggers? I think as Ninja, being able to efficiently block daggers in 1 breakpoint is just better value. And you also have the Flick Flack already for just like pretty insane blocking if you want to get higher value counts. So I'm opting further towards Shelter. Again, when we go into Marlin, which I think that deck is going to be absolutely toxic, you might want to add more D-Reacts in to try to counter that deck, which again is where I think Magical Momentum may likely become a 3rd Shelter. But that'll come with more testing, more time, right, as we actually play against these heroes. Then we got triple Warmongers. I think Warmongers is like, I mean, if you watch any of my deck techs, I feel like Warmongers is like always in all my decks as Ninja, because the opportunity cost is so low to play Warmongers in Ninja. It's just like, I think you have to. But next meta, I think Warmongers is going to be really powerful. I think Warmongers is going to be insane against Marlin, obviously. It's going to be really good against Puffin. Obviously, it's still really good against Azalea, which I assume she's still going to be strong until she leaves. But I think Warmongers is just going to be highly, highly powerful against the new heroes. And if we're expecting the new heroes to be good, then that means Warmongers will be good. So if you don't have your Warmongers, pick them up now, because they're actually on a little bit of a lower end after coming off of last meta. But I could see this card easily spiking back up to 100, over $100 again. Triple Warmongers, insane card. Then we have Tenacity, 1 of Tenacity. Again, with Lynx Mask, your tough matchups is like Victor, right? Or against Warriors. They're not tough, but like the super defensive decks, you want Tenacity in there because you can very typically end with like a Tenacity from 7 to 9. With Lynx, which is just very high value. I think it's one of the few ways you can beat like Victor and stuff like that. So I'm playing Tenacity for sure. I think this card, I would love to play it at 2. I just don't have the space for it. But yeah, definitely play Tenacity. And then this is kind of like my interesting, maybe spec tech with Visit the Floating Dojo. Not really seen a lot of play, obviously, but I think there is some merit, especially now with being limited to 3 Bonds and 3 Retrace, and those being very important cards in the deck. Being able to filter one of those back into your deck, and then also being able to make sure you set a Surging on top of your deck for the following turn. I think it's pretty good into some of those longer matchups or the matchups that you expect to be trying to block you out more. Now with Count Your Blessings being gone, I'm not really super worried about ever getting fatigued. Katsu never really was able to be fatigued, I feel like. But specifically now, I'm not really concerned about that. But I think it's an interesting card. So in terms of like just kind of fun tech, I think these are like my 2 funny options where maybe these could be flipped into something else like a second Tenacity or another Shelter. But I'm at 56 cards in the main deck so that I can side 4 cards in. So based on how that sideboarding space takes up, like obviously I want to have more cards that are flexible across a number of matchups, which Visit is, just because it's a 0-cost blue. It can really fit into a number of matchups, so it's quite flexible. So I want something that's kind of like that, a card that isn't hyper-specific to a matchup, but does well across a number of different matchups. And so that's why I look at like this being another blue. It doesn't hurt to have another blue. And a blue that adds some consistency and some power cards back into your deck, I think has some good flexibility. So for the meantime, visit the Floating Dojo. There's also like the Silverwind Shuriken, which we used to try out back in the day. There's also E-Pot, but I'll get to that. Here's my pile of like other options that you can potentially put in your deck. But this is where my list is at right now. I've kind of mentioned where some of the things are that might change, but otherwise I'm very happy with where it's at. It's not dramatically different than what my Katsu list was almost a year ago. Obviously, we've had to swap out the other bonds and stuff like that for some other options, but we have some very suitable replacements for that, so pretty happy with that. And then we'll just go into my debatable cards, or some of the cards that I thought about and just kind of haven't really liked as much. Obviously, right off the gate, Command and Conquer. You know, I'm a boomer. I love Command and Conquer. I love having a powerful on-hit that is also a popper. But let's be serious. Like, in this day and age, 6 is just not good enough as a popper in your sideboard. It's just some hope if you believe that 6 is enough, but it really isn't. Against Prism, those matchups are so short. Most of the time with Command and Conquer, if I end up popping a Herald and they still have Halo up, they just Halo into the Figment of Tenacity and I get punished, right? And then you lose the game right out from that point. Granted, you can debate, like, sure, if they're wasting their Halo to stop a pop and not, like, negate your Link's Mask or something, then that's a win. But you end up losing so much tempo eventually that it can just become really difficult to get back into the game. So I have just opted at this point to accept that you got to have 7s in your sideboard if you're specifically looking at them as popping options as opposed to a 6. The other thing about Command & Conquer was, outside of it being a popper, again, Katsu has always kind of had Command & Conquer back in the day. It was one of your powerful plays when you had Mask of Momentum and Tunic. But a lot of times now with Hardened Crossstrap, you're not playing Tunic as much. And sure, Hardened Crossstrap for CNC is very powerful as well. But CNC is very clunky with how the list is playing now. It's not a 0 cost, which is not good, because you want to make sure that you have the ability to Katsu trigger something, right? Like your combo deck. You're wanting to find your optimal pieces, and CNC doesn't fit into the curve as much anymore. It doesn't fit into your consistency of what you're trying to do. It could be very clunky. When you have a hand of Command & Conquer and Surging Strike in your hand, now you're competing for resources, and CNC is pretty dead. So I've just been kind of unimpressed with Command & Conquer. Again, maybe if Marlin ends up being way too hard of a matchup and you need more arsenal disruption, I could see CNC coming back into the deck. But Marlin also seems to be quite beefy with her ability to be able to block and throw back small hands. So I don't know how relevant that is. You might just want to try to kill her. So again, speculation, theory, if that matchup's really bad, if you do have more defense, like again, obviously I think Florin is kind of a tough matchup. I don't know how much CNC dramatically changes that, but it is an option. It's something to consider. I wouldn't play 3 of them. Again, I think 2 is good because you just don't want it to be super clunky in your deck. But if you want to test it out, be my guest. I'd like to get more information on it. Some of you may be wondering, like, well, why am I not playing the Mugenshi Lord of Wind package? I tried it out right at the beginning, right? Last meta when we didn't have bonds, I was playing this because you had no other better option. We were back in the Stone Ages of 2019, basically. But now that we have bonds accessible again, I just think that this tech is, for one, I really hate Mugenshi release for a number of reasons. For one, it doesn't have natural go again. It's a 1 cost, so it doesn't interact with Katsu ability or Kadachis, being able to turn on Kadachis. And then you ideally want to play 2 so that you can bond one of them out if you end up blocking early on. But the card itself is just not easily interactable because it has to be Whelming Gust Wave that it combos with, right? So I've just found it to be kind of old, right? Just not as reliable. And some people told me, like, oh, well, it helps you prevent against fatigue. I have not really been getting fatigued. I don't know what deck fatigues Katsu, especially now with Count Your Blessings being out of the game. So I'm not really sold on the value of this card. You can have some pretty absurd turns with Mugenshi release. Like, it does have a very high ceiling on your mega turns, but it also depends on your opponent not blocking. I do like Lord of Winds, but again, your blues are at such a high value now. Like the blues that you put in your deck are really powerful, and having to take out 3 of those blues for 3 Lord of the Wind, which is really good in very specific circumstances, and it's really only if you have the Mugenshi combo and your graveyard is filled with a bunch of gust waves. And again, like you're banishing cards out of your graveyard with bonds, so you're not always going to have like a very filled graveyard, because sometimes you're going to be bondsing out your gust waves to loop. So I've just found it to be somewhat counterintuitive to what the deck is doing now. The deck is just on a different level. It's just trying to do something else. This is a little bit older. Again, I totally understand if you play it. I just don't really see the appeal at this point in time for me personally. I just haven't really liked it for some time, and I still feel that way as we're moving into a more evolved variant of Katsu, I think, right? And then we have like the E-Pot, like I mentioned before. As a ninja, I always like having E-Pot in the sideboard for Jarl or something, but until Ice becomes more relevant, it's just a decent, the spots are so tight. I don't know if something this hyper-specific needs to go in right now. That's kind of what Visiting the Floating Dojo is, a replacement for this, where it's just more flexible across a number of different matchups. And then Salt. Salt, again, was relevant back in the day, I think, to a point. But now I don't see it having as much merit as it used to, with being able to turn Flusterfist on whenever you kind of want, as it being an alternative Salt the Wound. But it still doesn't require a combo. So if you have the space and you want to wombo combo people, I still think Salt is an interesting tech choice. Outside of that, I don't know. There's obviously some variation in the Katsu lists that I've seen, but a lot of stuff I think is starting to streamline and become more consistent across the board. There is obviously Prowess of Agility. That's another card that I've considered in Katsu. The only issue with Prowess is that with Katsu, you do end up getting some clunkers sometimes. You do end up having a lot more blocking scenarios where at the beginning of the game, as you're trying to fill grave, you want to be blocking out. So Prowess might not stay on, or you might not consistently get it. And it's also not a combo card. Again, I want to have high combo density just because all of my cards interact well with combo. And it being, again, blue, which is a highly valuable slot in the deck, not combo, not an attack, just kind of is counterintuitive, I feel like. So I am not playing that. I don't think it fits into this kind of deck that much. But outside of that, yeah, I think that Katsu is super fun. Again, like I mentioned, I'm very hype about it. If you haven't couldn't tell the energy from this video, I'm very excited to have Katsu back in the game. I'm very grateful to LSS to finally bringing Bonds back so that he can be playable again. Do I think that he is going to destroy Nationals? Not really. Do I think that he will be a relevant deck in Nats? Could be, actually. Like, you know, after Katsu's been out of the game for some time, some people might not know how to block him out as efficiently, especially now with the variance in his combo lines. It could be a little difficult. He's kind of like the premier racing aggro deck too. When you're playing against other aggro decks, typically you're much faster just because aggro decks don't want to block, right? Like when you don't want to block a deck, Katsu kind of rolls them. So against Syndra, against Fi, against the other ninjas, I do think Katsu has a slight edge. You are just going to struggle into the more defensive decks. I see Florian still as being one of the best decks in the game right now, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. And I do think that matchup can be quite tough. So in the meantime, please try the deck out. It is going to be very difficult if you haven't played Katsu before and you're just learning. It can be quite frustrating. Don't get frustrated. Goldfish your lines. He's kind of Kano-esque, right? Like you want to know your combo lines. You want to know your options. I mean, me being a seasoned veteran Katsu player, like I had mentioned at the beginning of the video, I still sit at the table sometimes just perplexed, staring at my board because there's so many options. I just don't know what the right option is or what the optimal option is. And even if there is maybe one anymore, like the world is your oyster. We finally have the ability to kind of flex, go to different lines, change your lines. We're living in a really nice time compared to what it used to be in Katsu when we were running like Leg Tap, Rising Knee Thrust, and Surging Strike. Those were like our only lines, right? Now you kind of are like a painter and you have lots of different paint and you can kind of create whatever you want to create as you're going through the game, which I think is super fun. So try the deck out. It's a blast. While it still exists in the game, as you move into the next meta, I have no idea where it's going to sit, if I'm being completely honest, but I can tell you that I think this list is really good. I have been enjoying it a lot. It's very consistent. It does what it wants to do, and you can really flex your skill, I think, with a deck like this. So I hope you guys enjoy this. Please let me know what your thoughts are. Please let me know any OG Katsu fans in there. Shout out to the Turtle Katsu boys, the OG mid-range Katsu boys, and girls, right? Anybody that played Katsu back in the day, 3, 4, 5 years ago. Look at how far we've come now that the deck is still in the game, as opposed to like Rhinar or Dory or, you know, any of those other decks that I think Katsu has almost fully fulfilled the vision of what you want him to be, right? So I'm done blabbing. I've said enough. I'm just kind of cycling around now, I feel like. So we're bonds looping. I hope you enjoy this, guys. Love you as always. Thanks for watching. Leave a comment, leave a like, subscribe if you enjoyed this, and tell me what you think I'm wrong about, and tell me what you think I should be playing and what I shouldn't. But otherwise, we'll see you in the next video, guys. Peace out.